He said that the first time he thought it was just another episode of sleep paralysis, that horrible feeling of being awake inside your own body, but unable to move even a finger. It had happened before, on nights of stress, insomnia, or profound exhaustion. The room felt heavy, his breathing too slow, and everything seemed blurry, as if the world were being seen through wet glass. But on that particular night, there was something different, something that didn't belong to any medical explanation, because as soon as he opened his eyes, he realized that the darkness of the room wasn't just the absence of light, it was presence, a dense, still presence, watching. He didn't see a shape, he didn't see a face, he didn't see a shadow, but he felt it. He felt the weight of that invisible gaze on his chest, as if someone was sitting there, studying every breath he tried to take. At first, he tried to calm himself. He mentally repeated everything he had read about paralysis. It's normal. It will pass. This isn't real. I just need to wait. But the more he tried to believe those words, the more the atmosphere seemed to contract around him, as if the entire room were holding its breath. The sensation of something sitting on his chest grew stronger, not as abstract pressure, but as real weight, body weight, the weight of someone who shouldn't be there. His eyes began to adjust to the darkness, and he saw, in the corner of his peripheral vision, a spot darker than the darkness itself. It wasn't moving. It wasn't breathing. It wasn't the shadow of a piece of furniture. It was something still, watching. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. His mouth wouldn't open. His neck wouldn't respond. And that's when he noticed the detail that destroyed any rational thought. The bed began to shake. First, very lightly, as if someone tapped their heel on the floor beside him. Then, stronger. Strong enough for the mattress to vibrate against his ribs. He tried to figure out if it was an earthquake, a car passing on the street, construction in the building next door, anything plausible. But there was no noise, no echo, no explanation. It was as if the bed trembled from the inside out, as if something underneath was pushing against the structure, testing its limits, searching for a gap. When the mattress slid a few centimeters to the right, dragging his body along, he felt his mind tear open in a silent scream. This wasn't sleep paralysis. It wasn't psychological. It wasn't a dream. The bed had moved, for real, with him on it, and the dark stain in the corner finally decided to move, not like a human being, but like a fold of darkness itself, unraveling and creating arms that were too long, too thin, stretching towards the center of the room. He tried to close his eyes, but couldn't. He tried to breathe faster, but no air came. And then the bed moved again, this time entirely, dragged violently, as if an invisible force had pulled the furniture a few centimeters closer to that thing that was now sliding across the floor as if the floor were liquid. Panic gripped his entire body. He tried to move a finger, any finger, but it was as if the presence had taken control of every muscle. And, while fighting against the paralysis, he realized something even more disturbing. The creature didn't want to hurt him. Not at that moment. It wanted to get closer. It wanted to get close to his face. It wanted to see. The bed moved for the third time, now slower, more intentionally, as if it were being aligned to an exact position, calculated with monstrous patience. The shadow rose, folding in on itself, and he felt the air change temperature as the entire room seemed to breathe along with it. He said that, when the bed moved for the third time, something inside him simply broke. It wasn't that fear you still try to rationalize, telling yourself it's a dream, that it's just your brain playing tricks on you. It was a raw, animal terror, the kind the body understands before the mind. He felt his feet dragging a few inches along with the mattress, the sheet stretching, the headboard scraping against the wall with a long, deep sound, as if the house were complaining. The sensation was that someone standing at the foot of the bed was holding the frame with both hands and gently pulling it, as if bringing a heavy piece of furniture closer. And the worst part was that he knew. It wasn't a metaphor. The darkest stain in the corner of the room now had height, width, and the distorted shape of something resembling a body that was too thin, too hunched over, with arms that were too long, as if they had been stretched to reach what they should never touch. The sleep paralysis he had always heard about didn't explain the bed moving, the headboard scraping, the air shifting. He tried again to force his fingers, any muscle, anything that would prove to himself that he still had control over his own body. He concentrated, all his willpower on his right hand, imagining his thumb moving, gripping the sheet, scratching the mattress. Nothing. It was like trying to move a stone with his mind. His body was there, heavy and warm, but the sensation was of being trapped behind his own eyes, watching everything as if watching a movie from inside the screen. The presence seemed to understand this powerlessness and savor every second of it. He felt with absurd clarity the weight on the mattress shift from the side of his body closer to his face, as if whatever was sitting next to him had decided to lean in, get closer, examine him more closely. The air touching his face grew colder, but with a strange, damp, almost sticky coldness, as if it came from a very old mouth that didn't breathe properly. The dark spot in the corner, now with an outline, began to move in a way his brain refused to process as walking. It wasn't a step, it wasn't a drag. It was as if the shadow glided across the floor, but left a kind of dense trail where it passed, an even darker spot on the darkness. Every inch of that thing seemed to weigh more than it should. The entire room reacted to his approach. The wardrobe creaked, the door vibrated, the ceiling fan, which was off, rotated a millimeter, as if something had lightly touched it. He realized that the presence wasn't coming from just one point. It occupied everything. It was above him, beside him, in the corner, behind the curtain. It was as if the entire room had gained consciousness and decided, on that specific night, to use this paralyzed body as a new toy. That's when he thought, with a remnant of logic, if it's paralysis, it will pass eventually. Just wait. But while he was thinking this, something happened that shattered this attempt at calm. The bed, which until then had only been pushed aside, began to be pulled forward. Not much, not violently, but enough for the wheels to scrape the floor, producing that muffled, long noise as if the room were larger than before. He knew the bed was practically against the wall. He knew there was no space there. But suddenly, there was. The mattress moved forward. The wall seemed to recede. He felt the body moving away from the outlet, the nightstand, the spot where he always slept, as if he were being carried to a part of the room that didn't exist during the day. As if, in the early morning, the space opened up to a place that wasn't on the house's floor plan. As he was dragged, he felt a shiver run from the soles of his feet to the nape of his neck, one so strong that it makes your eyes water on their own. The presence on the ceiling leaned closer, to the point where he felt as if something was almost touching its forehead to his, just observing, just measuring every micro-expression of the frozen face. His eyes, fixed on the dark ceiling, began to see a more defined outline, something slender, bent, as if a body was stuck to the ceiling with its hands and feet, lying face down, its face suspended directly above his. He didn't see details, but he saw density. He saw a movement so smooth, so slow, that it seemed against nature, as if time passed differently where that thing existed, and that's when panic made his heart threaten to leap out of his chest, because despite not seeing eyes, he knew that thing was looking directly at him, not at his body, inside. He tried to pray, not with much faith, not with beautiful words, not with that certainty you see in movies. He tried like someone drowning tries to grab anything that seems to float. The first words wouldn't come out. They died before they could form, as if each attempt was swallowed by air. He persisted mentally, repeating the simplest prayer he remembered from childhood, mixing wrong, jumbled phrases, all in a mess of fear. And it was precisely this clumsy mess that made a difference. The presence seemed to recede a millimeter, a single millimeter, but he felt it. The air touching his face became less cold. The bed stopped moving for a few seconds. The stain in the corner swayed, as if trembling with irritation. The thing above, on the ceiling, stretched its body with a dry crack that he heard clearly, as if ancient bones were being rearranged. The voice came for the first time, not from the shadow, not from the wall, not from the ceiling. It came from within the paralysis, a whisper that seemed to use his throat without reaching his ear. "It's no use," the voice said softly, almost calmly. "You stopped believing before you stopped praying." That entered as an accusation he didn't want to admit was true, because, deep down, he knew, for a long time, the words had come out of his mouth, but not from his heart. For a long time, the prayers had been more habit than faith, and the presence seemed to know this, as if it had witnessed all those moments when he repeated phrases without feeling anything. "You know it's just chemistry, right?" the voice continued, now mimicking the rational tone he himself used to ridicule fear. "Just brain impulses, just sleep disturbance. Let me show you what it really is." The bed moved again, now in a strange diagonal, as if being pulled towards the center of a circle he couldn't see. His body had no idea where it was in relation to the walls. He only felt that he was being taken away from any familiar reference point. He tried to strain his neck, turn his head, look to the side, but the paralysis was absolute, as if someone had locked every joint. From the inside, with a key. The only free movement was his eyes. And it was through them that something even worse happened. The presence began to play with his field of vision. Each involuntary blink made the room seem a little different. In one blink, he saw the wardrobe in the corner. In the next, the wardrobe seemed farther away. In another, there was no wardrobe at all, just a wall he didn't recognize. The sensation was of being pulled into a place that looked like the bedroom. But it wasn't the bedroom anymore. Meanwhile, the weight on his chest increased, as if something had decided to lie completely on top of him, chest to chest, face to face, breathing the same air. He smelled a strange odor. It wasn't mold, it wasn't sweat, it wasn't anything familiar. It had something of iron, something of earth, something of a place that had been closed in for a long time. The voice returned, now closer, in a direct breath, even though he couldn't feel lips. "You wanted proof, didn't you? You laughed at everything, called it superstition, thought it was cool to say you didn't fear what you couldn't see. So look at me." He tried to look away, but something held his gaze as if it were physical. And for an instant, the darkest spots within the shadow took the form of eyes, not round, not human, but 2 points of even deeper darkness, like holes dug within the darkness. They didn't shine, they didn't reflect, they absorbed. He felt his own heartbeat echoing inside his head, as if his entire body were now a sounding board for that presence. Each pulse seemed synchronized with the movement of the thing in the room. When he tried to calm himself, the shadow came closer. As panic rose, the shadow seemed to feed, thicken, gain weight, until it reached a point where he almost gave up. "Do whatever you want," he thought, exhausted, weak, hopeless. And that's when the bed gave the biggest jolt of the night, as if it had been pulled all at once towards something he couldn't see. His body shook inside, although outwardly it remained rigid, and the thing reacted with sickly enthusiasm. The whole room vibrated. It was precisely at that moment, the exact second he thought of giving up, that something simple happened in the next room. His cell phone vibrated on the table. A random message from someone who had no idea what was happening there, but that thin, human, technological sound coming from outside that agreement between him and the presence cut through the atmosphere like a blade. For a second, he remembered that there was a world beyond that room, that there were people, that there was life, routine, simple things. That memory brought back a thread of will, a tiny thread, but enough for a phrase to escape, weak, distorted, almost inaudible only within his mind. God help me. The reaction was immediate. The thing shrank in a visible spasm. The room's temperature jumped, going from biting cold to a strange warmth, as if someone had opened an invisible window. The bed stopped moving. The shadow on the ceiling contracted as if crushed by something he couldn't see, and a low sound, like an angry growl, filled the space. The presence didn't disappear, but it retreated, as if it had been pushed, as if it had been reminded that he wasn't completely alone, even after having disbelieved almost everything. He realized he could move the tip of his finger, just one, then two. The paralysis didn't go away all at once, as in a scientific report. It subsided, irritated, as if the entity loose in that room was reluctantly relinquishing control of his body. And meanwhile, he kept whispering, as if warning that it wasn't over. "You'll fall asleep again. You always fall asleep again. And I always wait." Now tell me, have you ever experienced sleep paralysis? Have you ever felt your body locked up, your chest heavy, that clear sensation that someone was sitting on top of you, watching? Do you still think it's just in your head, or have you suspected there was something more to it? Comment below what has happened to you, and don't forget to like and subscribe, because this story doesn't end on the first night. And in the following nights, he discovers that the problem was never just the paralysis. The problem is what takes advantage of it. He said that, after that first night, he spent the whole day with the feeling that the room was still watching him, even with the door open, even with the sun coming in through the cracks, even with the normal noises of the house trying to mask what had happened. It was as if the presence had become ingrained in the furniture, the ceiling, the sheets, inside the very wood of the bed. He avoided looking directly at her all day, like someone avoiding looking at an aggressive animal trapped behind a fence that's too thin. Every time he passed through the door, he felt a shiver run from his back to the nape of his neck, not the usual shiver of cold, but one that seemed like a warning, as if something were standing behind the doorframe, just waiting for the moment when he was vulnerable again. And even though he tried to convince himself that it was all a result of the paralysis, he knew, deep down, that he was lying to himself, because the bed had moved, and there was no explanation for it. He swore that that night he would do everything differently. He left the hallway light on, put on music on his phone, left videos playing to create some sense of companionship. He even slept on the sofa for a few minutes, but the exhaustion was so great that his body ended up dragging him back to the bedroom, as if programmed to return to the same territory where her presence awaited. He lay down carefully, as if that could prevent anything, and remained motionless, eyes open, staring at the ceiling like someone observing an invisible enemy. For a while, nothing happened. No cracking, no trembling, no chill rising up his legs. Only silence. And that silence was the first sign that something was wrong. It was a silence too deep, too artificial, as if the house had turned off its own noises so that he would perceive only one thing: that the presence was still there. When he finally began to doze off, he felt the first change. It wasn't total paralysis, like the night before. It was worse. His body began to feel heavy in parts, first his feet, then his legs, then his hips. It was as if the presence had learned from the first time and was now taking control in stages, so that he would consciously feel everything. He tried to sit up, but the force holding his legs seemed to pull him down, like hands gripping ankles underwater. The ceiling darkened slowly, as if a shadow too large were descending, obscuring the light. And when he blinked, he saw, clearly without a doubt, the bed slide 3 centimeters to the side. Exactly 3 centimeters, as if it were being realigned. The presence didn't just want to get closer, it wanted to prepare the ground. He tried to speak, but his throat locked mid-breath. It wasn't ordinary paralysis, it was as if something were inside his throat, pressing from the inside out, preventing enough air from passing through to form words. The presence seemed to enjoy this, because the room grew colder, as if it was smiling. And then, from the corner of the wall where the wardrobe cast a shadow, the first movement emerged. Not a whole body, just an arm, long, bent at an impossible angle, emerging from the darkness as if from somewhere else. The arm rested on the floor, slowly testing its weight, and then another arm appeared, as if the creature were crawling out of a crevice no one could see. The bed trembled again, in a rhythm that mimicked his heartbeat, fast, then slow, then fast again. It was as if the presence was synchronizing the room with his fear. The creature, still without a defined face, raised part of its body, revealing an arched back and an overstretched neck, as if searching for the best angle to observe him. Its eyes, if they were eyes at all, were 2 oval spots shining in the darkness, not with light, but with an absence of light, like holes that absorbed everything around them. He tried to turn his face, but his neck wouldn't obey. The creature tilted its head almost curiously, as if it found his futile effort amusing, and then it began to crawl towards the bed. With each movement, the mattress vibrated, as if the entire room were connected to whatever was crawling. He felt a weight at the foot of the bed, as if something had climbed onto it, but it still approached calmly, without haste. The voice finally came, not like the previous night, in internal whispers, but now using the entire room as an acoustic chamber. "I told you I would wait." The wardrobe trembled, the window creaked. The lamp, even when switched off, gave off a short glow, as if something were passing in front of it at an absurd speed. He tried to move, but the more he tried, the heavier he became. The presence was sucking away his will, his energy, his resistance, as if it needed it to fully materialize. The mattress began to sink, first slowly, then deeper, as if something very heavy was settling on top of him, rising, until the weight reached his chest. He felt the air escape his lungs. The creature was now completely on top of him, analyzing, smelling, assimilating the shape of his body. And then something new happened. It wasn't movement, it wasn't sound, it was intention. He felt, with a painful clarity, that the presence wanted to enter. Not the room, his body. It was as if it were testing where to fit its own form inside his. The creature's head came so close to his face that he could feel a damp warmth coming from the void, where there should have been a mouth. The air smelled of something ancient, stored away, dead and alive at the same time. And the voice, now low, too intimate, too unreachable, whispered in his ear, "On the first night I touched your bed. On the second, I will touch you." He tried to scream. Nothing. He tried to move his fingers. Nothing. He tried to pray. Nothing. The creature pressed its invisible chin against his chest, like an animal marking its owner. And the bed moved. For the 4th time, this time a few centimeters back, as if being dragged back to the corner, positioned exactly where it wanted to act. The feeling was clear. The room was no longer his. It was hers. The bed was no longer a bed. It was an altar. And then the voice finished. "When you stop fighting, I will enter completely." He said that after that second night, the division between fear and reality no longer existed. Now everything was mixed. The day seemed shorter, as if the sunlight had lost its strength. The hours passed slowly, as if time were avoiding nightfall, but it always arrived, pushing him back into that room that no longer belonged to him. He tried to convince himself that he wouldn't sleep, that he would stay awake until dawn, but the exhaustion was so great that his body gave way. It was as if the creature knew exactly when he would become vulnerable. It was as if it were waiting for the precise moment when his mind slipped into the state between the conscious and the unconscious. That's where it acted. That's where it gained strength. That's where it tried to enter. And on that third night, he realized that the presence was no longer just testing limits. It was prepared. The whole house seemed to breathe differently, as if it had become a single organism, pulsating, expanding and contracting in the same rhythm as the creature. The floor was colder than it should have been. The shadows were longer than the light allowed. And, for the first time, he was sure he wasn't alone. Not because he saw something, but because the room seemed full, infested, occupied by something unseen, but which moved with the intelligence of a patient predator. He lay down slowly, like someone lying on a bed they no longer trust, and kept his eyes open, waiting for the inevitable. And the inevitable came early. At 3:08 a.m., the mattress took its first breath, because it wasn't just a sinking. It was an organic movement, as if something alive were beneath the structure, sliding, preparing itself, positioning its body. He felt the air change direction, as if a warm wind were coming from under the bed, rising between the cracks, touching his skin like invisible fingers. The sheet moved on its own, slowly, rising up his thigh, his waist, his chest, until it stopped at his neck, not as if someone were pulling, but as if the fabric were obeying a command. Then came the sound. A new sound. A sound he had never heard in any animal. It was an irregular, wet breathing, as if the creature were testing lungs it didn't have. Each time it breathed, the air vibrated, as if the very atmosphere of the room were being scratched. He squeezed his eyes shut, praying that it was just that, a presence above the covers, formless, without direct touch. But when he opened his eyes again, he saw the shadow projected onto the ceiling, not an ordinary shadow. It was a shadow that moved even when he was motionless. It was elongated, crooked, with arms that stretched almost to touch the door, and worst of all, it breathed. He saw the movement of the shadow's ribcage rising and falling, even though nothing was physically there. The creature made its first touch. Light, cruel, calculated. A finger, thin, too long, touched the center of his forehead. The touch was icy, but at the same time it burned inside, as if it were tattooing its intention onto his skin. He tried to scream, but his voice came out muffled in his throat, as if it had been blocked from within. The finger slid down, passing the line of his nose, his mouth, until it stopped at his chin. The creature seemed to measure his face piece by piece, like someone choosing the perfect mold. And then, for the first time, he felt its true objective: to take his body from the inside. It was as if the creature were trying to memorize the proportions, understand how to move its jaw, how to occupy the space behind its eyes, how to draw air from lungs it didn't yet have. He tried to turn his face, but the finger pressed, lightly but firmly, and his neck stopped responding. The bed trembled again, only now much more strongly, as if trying to escape with him, as if the furniture had consciousness and was trying to push him away from the entity. But the presence held the entire mattress with an invisible force. He felt the bed being pulled back inch by inch until it was exactly aligned with the dark corner where the creature hid. And then came the voice. Not the voice of the room, not the voice inside his head, but the voice from inside his body. He felt his chest vibrate before the sound came out. His throat moved involuntarily. His lips parted on their own. And a sentence came out in his voice, but it wasn't him speaking. It was her using his body as a test. "Let me in." The feeling of despair was so great that his heart ached, as if someone had squeezed it with their hand. He tried to stand, but the creature pressed against his chest with a weight that didn't seem to come from above. It seemed to come from within, as if it were pushing from under his ribs. His vision blurred. The edges of the room began to vibrate. The air grew heavy, and for a moment he saw clearly its form approaching his face. It wasn't human. It wasn't animal. It was a failed simulation, as if it were trying to assemble a face using parts that didn't fit. A mouth formed where there shouldn't have been one. Then it disappeared. Then it reappeared crooked. Eyes appeared and vanished, as if the creature were deciding what size would best fit his body. And then it attempted the final step, to enter. He felt his forehead burn, as if something were trying to pierce the bone. The pressure was so strong that he thought he would faint. His breathing became short, trapped, as if a second lung were trying to pull in the same air. His body began to tremble. His vision would fade and return, like a light bulb about to burn out. He thought he was going to lose. He thought the creature would finally succeed. He thought it would be the last time he had control of his own body, until something unexpected happened, something that didn't come from him. But it didn't come from the creature either. A sound, small, dry, simple. 3 knocks on the door. The creature froze. The room stopped. The bed stopped, the air stopped, and on the other side of the door, someone called his name, someone who shouldn't have been awake, someone who shouldn't have been there, someone who shouldn't have had a voice at that moment. His mother. He said that when he heard his mother calling from the other side of the door, something inside the room changed so quickly that it made the air uneven, as if the atmosphere had stumbled. The creature, which until then had advanced with monstrous confidence, froze completely, as if those 3 knocks were an order it hadn't expected, an interruption outside the script. The finger pressing against his chest recoiled a few inches, trembling as if the presence were afraid. The shadow on the ceiling shrank, writhing, searching for a place to hide, but failing. The bed finally stopped being pulled, as if the creature had for a moment lost permission to continue. He tried to call out to his mother, but no voice came out. Only a weak breath escaped his throat. The presence turned its shapeless face toward the door, and he realized something terrible. It didn't want his mother to hear anything. The creature spread across the wall like a living stain, rising, falling, writhing, until it completely covered the area near the doorknob, as if protecting that space from being opened. His mother knocked again, now harder, calling his name with growing concern. And it was at that moment that he saw, for the first time, the shadow of the entity retreat like a cornered animal, shrinking to the corners of the ceiling while emitting a sound that was neither human nor animal, a sound between hissing, breathing, and words that don't exist. The bed then slid back to the center of the room on its own, as if an invisible force were erasing the traces of what had happened. The mattress inflated and deflated, almost organically, until it stabilized. The creature remained huddled on the ceiling, but he noticed something even more terrifying. It wasn't hiding from his mother. It was waiting for his mother to leave. The entity seemed to know that as long as there was another human presence nearby, it couldn't act completely. Then, when his mother finally gave one last call and walked away down the hallway, the creature descended from the ceiling like a black liquid running down the wall. He tried to run. He tried to get up. He tried to turn his body to the side. Nothing. The paralysis was back. But this time, it wasn't a bodily malfunction. It was the creature's imposition. It approached slowly, without the sound of footsteps, as if floating a few centimeters above the ground. Its presence was more defined now, as if each attempt to enter him had made that form more solid, more real, more capable of existing in the physical world. Elongated arms opened to the sides, like a puppet being stretched before use. The face tried to form again, tried to copy his, but missed the symmetry, leaving misaligned eyes. Crooked jaw, a displaced mouth. Even so, it insisted. It wanted to be him, and then everything became absolutely silent. A silence so profound that it seemed to swallow the very gravity of the room. The creature placed its hand, now with 5 perfect fingers, imitating the human shape, on the side of his head. The pressure was so strong that his vision went white for a second. He felt a crack inside his skull, as if something was trying to make space. His breath caught in his throat. His lungs seized, and the sensation of being pushed out of his own consciousness began to grow. It was as if someone was trying to replace him from within, tearing away his identity layer by layer, and when the creature finally found the exact position, it whispered, "Now you open the door." The command echoed within his mind, not in his ears. It was sharp, cutting, destructive. And, without understanding how, he felt his own hand begin to move, against his will, against his despair, against his fear. A finger trembled, rising from the mattress, as if responding to the order. The creature smiled with half its face. Not because it was happy, but because it was almost there. It wanted him to get up, go to the door, and invite it out of the room. Because if he did that, it would have no more limits, no more walls, no more borders. It would be free inside the house. But before the finger touched the wood, something happened. The light came on, alone, bright, clear, almost violent. The creature recoiled as if burned, writhing, undoing part of the form it had managed to build. Its face dissolved. Its arms lost proportion. Its body turned to shadow again, spreading across the ceiling at a desperate speed. He fell sideways onto the bed, finally regaining movement, coughing, gasping, trying to relearn how to breathe. The bedroom door opened slowly, and his mother appeared, but she hadn't turned on the light, and she hadn't opened the door. She was pale, trembling, pointing at the burnt-out light switch. "The light turned on by itself," she whispered. "Son, what's in your room?" He had no answer, because as he looked at the ceiling, he saw the last part of the creature disintegrating, not fleeing, observing, as if saying it wasn't defeat, it was postponement. And then, before disappearing completely, she whispered something that froze the world. "I know your name." He collapsed to the floor, crying, trembling, holding his face in his hands as if he could stop his mind from crumbling. His mother rushed to him, asking what was happening, but he couldn't explain. He couldn't organize words. He could only repeat, "She called me. She knows who I am. She tried to come in." That night, he slept on the sofa. His mother stayed awake beside him. The lights remained on until dawn, and when the sun finally touched the living room floor, he felt a small, fragile, ambiguous relief, because he knew he hadn't won. He knew the creature hadn't given up. He knew it would return. When the house went dark again, when he blinked for too long, when his body gave way, when his mind relaxed, and sometimes in the silence of the early morning, when the whole house sleeps. He swears he hears the bedroom wood moving, like a bed sliding, like a mattress breathing, as if something up there was practicing the movement of entering.